Hello and welcome back to our next installment of Claire in the Chair. I'm Claire Corby and I run Capital Buyers Agency, which is a buyers agency that advocate especially just for property buyers here in Canberra. Today I want to talk to you all about schooling. So sometimes we find our clients are unfamiliar with the differences in Canberra schooling, not sure where to start about what school to choose, or indeed we're working with local families who are thinking it might be time to change schools, and we really need to start with that conversation first when it's time to buy property. There's a few reasons for this, so let's dive in. A little bit of background, I guess, about Canberra schools and probably my own personal experience, because let's be honest, schooling is a fairly loaded conversation, especially when we get into public versus private debate. So, what I don't want to do today is to really take sides or present one option as better than the other, because at the end of the day, spoiler alert, it's really about what fits best of all, best fit for the students in your family and getting the right outcome for them to make life so much easier and the journey so much better for everyone involved. So, a little bit about, I guess, my experiences as well, which certainly flavour some of the advice and conversations we have with our clients. My mum was privately educated here in Canberra, and my dad went through the public system. So we had a bit of a flavour of both. My mum then went on to become a public school teacher throughout the 70s and the 80s and the 90s as well, when I was going to school. But she made a point never to teach at the schools that I was teaching at. That was very much a no-no for her. So it was a little bit different, of course, having family that had gone through one system and then another family member having gone through the other. And then my mum, being a public school teacher, chose to put her children through the public school system here in Canberra. And today, many of my friends are teachers. In fact, some of my mum's friends are principals. Some are recently retired. And schooling has always been a common thread and conversations about schooling and different options and things like that. So it's always been a topic of conversation around our dinner table growing up. Public or private debate is a challenging one for many families to work through, especially perhaps when you might have your own experience of what you've experienced growing up and what you might think might happen for your children and then what you might need to pivot to, things like that. So when it's thinking about time for a change or selecting the school to start with, it can be really tempting to jump online and look at some of the forum groups or Facebook groups and see some of the comments being left. I give a degree of caution here because what tends to happen, I don't know if you've noticed too, if you've ever gone on to these things, it tends to be the vocal minority that maybe have had a really horrible experience or are very strongly opinionated in one area. So they're going to jump up and down the loudest. And what you're not going to find is that balance of opinion. Perhaps many other people who are quite happy with the school but don't jump online and keep all worrying out about how perfectly happy they are. So it's a bit misrepresentation, I think, of the overall balance. And that's what I'm hoping to bring to the table today, is to just have a bit more of an objective discussion around some of the schooling options to help you consider what might be right for you and your family. To start with the public system here in Canberra, what we have, it might differ a little bit if you've had experiences in other states, but our preschool system and public primary school system, preschool begins when you're 4 years old. So 4-year-olds go to preschool, which is usually a small little setting adjacent to a primary school quite often. And then when they hit 5 years old, various state cutoffs are different in different states as well, but by and large, 5-year-olds will be in kindergarten, which is part of the primary school unit that goes from kindergarten through year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's a fairly defined unit. There are variations. There are some schools in Canberra that have like an early childhood unit. So perhaps they might go from preschool through to year 2 or year 3. But yeah, by and large, you'll have a preschool and then a public primary school through year 6. Then we have public system high school. So in Canberra, high school goes from year 7 through 8, 9, 10. And that's a distinct unit in itself. And it's a little bit different, of course, if you step up from primary school, you go into high school up to year 10, you get more electives, you move around a bit, you don't have the one teacher all the time, just the usual stuff like that. Then when you hit year 11, if you are choosing to go into year 11 and 12, because of course some kids finish up at year 10, but year 11 and 12 in the ACT go into the college system. So this is a distinct unit, and there's again fewer colleges around, and they tend to have larger student numbers and much more electives and much more breadth of choice of subjects to do and specialities you want to take as well. To put together a package, you might be having an A package or a T package or whatever it might take to go through and get your ATAR. So that's your admission ranking to go through and apply for tertiary education at the end of year 12. So that's a little bit, I guess, about how the public system works when you're going through those. Some people aren't aware that year 11 and 12 has its own distinct separate schooling place of schooling. So that's college. And different colleges also have different flavours. So perhaps you've got a student that's a little bit sporting inclined. There are some colleges that specialise and have better connections through with the sporting environments, sporting associations. And there are others that are a bit more, I don't know, perhaps theatre based or in the arts and things like that as well. So you might find, depending on, what your student is interested in, sometimes people pick colleges out of area because they know they really, really want to choose that particular college. But by and large, most people go to the one that's in zone. In terms of going to a school that's outside of your area, well, that can be a little bit tricky in the public system, but we'll dive into that in a second. Also to note, in the public system, some schools specialise. So they might have a bilingual program, such as a French stream, where all classes are taught completely in French, perhaps. That's a fairly common one that I think a lot of families perceive that school to be good. So I'm talking about Tilapia here. So they might enroll in Tilapia for primary school, not realising that everything's in French. And if your child doesn't speak French, then hey, got a bit of a problem there. So the others, like Yarralumla has a great Italian program as well. Sometimes you might be looking for a school that perhaps has a really good gifted and talented program to stretch a child who has the talent and capacity and potential there. Others have things like the Stephanie Alexander, it's called Kitchen Garden program, I think it is. There's a couple of schools around town that offer that. So it's really focusing on that veggie growing and cooking, life skills, that kind of aspect as well, which can be appealing to some families too, to know about that kind of program that's on offer as well. Other schools are known for their excellent music programs. So if you have someone that's particularly talented in music, you might be interested in having a chat with particular schools around music programs. Others offer as well the International Baccalaureate, the IB program. Every time I say that a different way. International Baccalaureate, IB program. So they've got a primary years program, a middle years program, and a senior years program, and then they're going to the IB. I should know how to say it. My son is doing it. But it's some, again, public or private. There are options at both. So don't assume you have to go private to get the IB program. It can be really handy as well if you're thinking about, future postings, or if you're just after, a particular international standard of education for whatever reason. That can be something just to keep in mind as well, that an IB program might be of interest to the students in your family. Then again, we also have other specialist schools. There are some public schools that are known for having really good support for students that might be on the spectrum and have some additional needs. There's also purely specialist schools that look after children with disabilities and additional needs that really need some extra support as well. So there's a range of schools, and I'm sure if you're in that boat, you're probably well aware of those options already. But there are a few around Canberra as well, just to be aware of that too. And then we get into the private options. So private schools, some start at 4 years of age. Some even have a 3-year-old sort of / daycare type thing, or have a daycare unit attached to them. Most of them will start in that sort of, have a preschool unit and then start in kindergarten. Pardon me. Others have a intake from year 3 onwards. So it just depends. Again, you've got some that are single sex, some that are co-ed, some that are, I would say, relatively changed. There's one in particular, I'm thinking Canberra Grammar School, that's now co-ed, where for years, like, oh gosh, it's coming up to its 100-year anniversary soon. And they've only been co-ed for probably the last, I'd say, decade or so, probably a little bit more than a decade, actually, if I think about it. But yeah, there are some that are co-ed, some that are single sex. You've got the Catholic system, which is sometimes a little bit less expensive than the Anglican system. So Catholic, they'll be all around. You'll see the Catholic primary schools. Then we've got Catholic high schools as well. So Catholic high schools tend to go from year 7 through to year 12. The Anglican options, of course, the original, the Monaro school, which started off, sort of founding School of Canberra a little bit, and then Canberra Grammar School it became. So we've got Girls Grammar and Canberra Grammar School. Girls Grammar being single-sex school, and then Canberra Grammar School now being co-ed, like I said. They then had a bit of an offshoot, and Radford was born. So then we've got Radford, and then had a bit of an offshoot again, and Bergman. It's a result of that to service the growing needs of the Gungahlin region. But in terms of Anglican options in Tuggeranong, there isn't anything, sadly, south of the Canberra Grammar School in the inner south. So if you're looking at Anglican options on the south side, there really isn't. There's just Catholic options. There's also some independent schools. So I can't fail not to mention those. Up Steiner School, we've got some Montessori options as well. Plus there's some more independent schools as well, different subcultures as well. So there's lots. And then, of course, we've got rise of homeschooling. And I think this has really taken a bit of a surge since COVID, and now got the benefits of technology a lot more there. But we won't really dive in so much to homeschooling today, because I'm going to keep it focused on Canberra and the schools that are here as well. So if you're thinking about choosing a private school, I would really encourage you to go along to the open days that they hold throughout the year. You can take a tour of the school, and often you'll have some senior students come along and guide you on those. It's a really good chance, I think, to observe the culture of a school, see how the students interact, see how the principal presents the school and what type of leadership there is there as well. Schools such as Canberra Girls Grammar even offer like a come and try for a day. So potentially your daughter could go along and just see how it goes and see what they're like, sitting in classes and going through a normal school day. That can be something that's really helpful to alleviate some anxiety and things like that as well. So have a chat if you're thinking about looking at private school options, or indeed maybe for the future or sooner than that. They do have fairly long wait lists, most of the schools, especially the Anglican options. They can have very extensive wait lists. So some people will put their child's name down at birth. So that is something, we often talk with families with very little kids, and they say, oh, we're not really thinking about schooling options just yet. And we say, well, it might be time to think about that, just so that you know, because some schools take a really, really long time to get into. Of course, as well, with private schools, they have specific intake years. So have a look at their websites. All of that information's in there. Generally, it's year 7, they have an intake year. Some of the schools also have slots for defence families. So don't assume if you are an ADF family that you're not going to be able to get in and there's really long wait lists, because some of them actually do have dedicated spots for just that cyclical nature of the defence community, and they have some spots there. So do have a chat with the schools and see what options might be available for you. One piece of advice I'd really suggest is a book that I found incredibly useful a few years back. It's a little bit older now. I think it was written in 2014, but the book is called Free Schools by David Gillespie. And the guy, David's a very analytical-minded, very objective kind of guy. I think he has 6 children, he said in his book. So he was really thinking about the cost of, do I go through private schooling with my 6 children, or do I go for the public option, and how do we go about choosing a school? So I found that really, really insightful and really useful around not, just looking at what is there in terms of glossy, beautiful resources and buildings and fancy brochures, but getting down to what is the guts and what makes a good school, and how do you identify a good school in the context of not whether a school is good or bad, right? It's all through the lens of your family and your experience and what you hope for, but also I think really it's got to be about what your child needs. If you might have a fairly shy, anxious, small child, and perhaps a different setting might help them foster and grow and develop with some really, really good teachers that can help them through that, rather than perhaps, you might have a child on the other end who really thrives with multiple friendship groups and would like some variety in social settings and things like that. So anyway, just a little bit of personal mum opinion there. And as a mum who has put some kids through school here and like I said, knows a fair few teachers and friends and has been through it, lived through it for many years, I think schooling is just such an important part of people's lives that you can't not talk about it. When it comes to property, it is crucial to think about things like priority enrolment areas and housing because your address will determine your school zoning. We're talking about the public system here, but it will determine what local public school you are in zone for. So that is critically important if you're hoping to pick one particular school over another. Now, the PEAs or priority enrolment areas have been known to change over time, especially at the moment in the inner north. Some families are being caught unawares with the development of a new school up in Gungahlin, up in Kenny, that is actually drawing some families from the inner north up to that school. So they can be in what's now called a shared priority enrolment area. So a shared PEA doesn't mean you can choose between the two schools. If one is already oversubscribed, what they've now done, is divided into A list and B list schools. So you might find that you're a little bit unhappy with that. And it can be very expensive to change because guess what? It involves moving house. So if you think about the challenges of moving house just to change schools, they look at the transaction costs of doing so, the stamp duty, the agent fees, the moving costs, let alone choosing and finding a home, right? It's a huge upheaval for your family just to change schools, but sometimes families do that for that exact reason. And that can be a large part of why they seek out our help as well, just to navigate that through and make sure they're making the right choice. At the end of the day, it's just a really important thing to think about schooling at the beginning. You don't necessarily have to pick your ideal school straight off the bat because, look, cultures and things and principles can move and it can all ebb and flow over the years. But just know that you've got options where you choose to buy and that you've got options that you're happy with. So if you're thinking about perhaps, there might be a lack of private school education where you are, we often work with families to look at things like the bus routes because, you've got the public school buses, but also, the public bus routes, but also the school buses that perhaps your students in your family can hop on and get themselves to and from school because that is going to happen twice a day for many, many years. So rather than joining the traffic jams around school, if they can get themselves to and from, it's going to make life so much easier for the rest of your household as well as giving the kids some independence too. So if you need a bit of hand to choosing or talking about schools or not sure where to start, do go on some of those tours. Have a chat with some other mums around Canberra. But again, everything is very subjective. So if you're looking for some advice, I'd start with that book, Free Schools. Just start to build up your knowledge bank about it. And as always, reach out for a chat if there's anything you need in terms of property and schooling and finding the right fit.